Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Patty Framo here. Today is Monday, September the 24th, 2018, your second daily dose of happy for the day. And we are really reaching for the skies with this one because we thought we were just recording, and we found out not only was it not recording, it wasn't broadcasting, and the whole thing broke in the middle. And we're saying, but no, it can't do that. This was a great podcast. So we're going to try to recreate it here. We don't know what's going to happen with it. But, boy, we had it really going there, Patty. It was really good.
Oh, man, I am telling you, that was just something else. So, and what was so funny is that, you know, the topic we talked about discussing today was getting ready to be ready. To be ready,
right.
Obviously, that's what we were doing.
We were getting ready. Yes, apparently.
We were just getting ready.
Which is astonishing because I felt pretty ready, especially by halfway through what we thought was an actual show. You know, I was feeling good.
It was actually a really good one, too. That's why I said, well, to do it again.
But that's all right. We're going to see if we can reproduce it here. Not word for word. We're not going to try to do that. But we're going to try to reproduce the energy because the energy was great.
Yes.
The energy was wonderful.
Really good. Good stories and stuff, yeah. So,
and that's important. That's important because when you're talking about getting ready to be ready, well, first of all, we should define that because, this is a relatively new Abraham concept. This is one of the things that they've come up with. How recently? This is pretty new, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard it like in the last 6 months to a year, I think.
Okay. Yeah. That
Abraham has used getting ready to be ready. And for some reason at first I wasn't grasping what that really meant. Mm-hmm. But, I spent most of my morning today just listening to Abraham. I just got in the mood. I was, completely procrastinating from all the things I was supposed to do on my list and just thought I'm going to spend the morning listening to Abraham. And one of the things that I listened to a few around getting ready to be ready. So, my interpretation of that is when we're ready, then we're ready. And that's when things flow into our experience. But the step before being ready is getting ready to be ready. And the step before that is getting ready to be ready, and on and on from there. So it's just when we're sort of in that bridging piece. So when we're,
So getting ready to be ready, that's the place that people are most commonly in when they're trying to manifest something and they're trying to convince themselves and others that they're really ready. Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. I got my vision board over on my chair here and I've been doing all my affirmations and I've been visualizing and I just read The Secret 3 times and, I've been doing all these things. So it should be showing up at any time now, right? Because I really need it to show up.
Right. Which really probably shows you're not ready when you're really needing something to show up. Because as long as we, one of the audios I was listening to this morning was talking about like the example of money, not having as much money as you desire or you need. And that's exactly what people do. They get all revved up. They set a goal. They say all the right words. I have millions of dollars flowing to me easily and joyously. Okay. So I got to just say the first time around, I did say joylessly.
You did.
I meant joyously. It was my Freudian slip. But if you don't believe the words, you've jumped ahead too far. And it's really needing to take those incremental vibrational steps and bridging those beliefs from here, which is like a total lack of money, to there, which is plenty of money. And to bridge the beliefs, we need to begin the process of being ready. So, where you were saying earlier, like, how do we do that? And of course, it's always the same answer, which is get happy.
Right.
Same answer, but how do you get happy if you're not in a happy place?
Well, especially if you're talking about money, right? If you're asking for money and you're feeling doubtful about it, it means you don't have enough right now. And when you're in that place, that's not a comfortable place. That's a really uncomfortable place. So you can try to fake it till you make it all you want to. But the simple fact is there's a little piece of you that says, oh, you're such a liar.
Right. Exactly. So, it really does take slowing that momentum down because that momentum is flowing in that direction of the negative, where you've got all these beliefs and all these worries about it. So, in order to stop that momentum, the train going in one direction, you can't just flip it around. You got to slow it down and then stop it and then turn it around. Same with those, that momentum of negative thoughts. And the number one way that Abraham always recommends to do that is meditation, where we really let the mind settle down and we feel detached and we release those thoughts that have been holding us apart from our inner being, and you feel that connection with source. But, you know, for a lot of us, that is a real struggle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a struggle. And even worse, it is reason for getting concerned, right? That's the way I, in my own mind, I know that's what I end up doing. I get concerned, like, you know, well, I do believe this stuff works, but on the other hand, I'm not real sure it's working in this case, because I mean, this is really serious. I need some big money here, you know? And,
Exactly.
and all of a sudden I'm on the wrong track just by saying that much. And I stay there. And what's even worse, I mean, we were talking in the non-podcast, the podcast that went to nowhere. In the non-podcast.
It's like the stairway to heaven.
That's right, yes.
The podcast, it was actually just a discussion.
It was it was a great discussion, though. Let me tell you.
It was great. That's wicked.
But when you're in that space where you're trying to get to, you know where you have to get to, you know that it doesn't feel comfortable to get there, and you know a big piece of it is letting go of the bad part that you're in right now, and you don't really remember how to let go of that because you're hanging on to it for dear life. Oh, that's not, I mean, just saying that is tiring to say.
Yeah. And even just being when you're in that negative place, it's like you don't, you know, you're looking through the world of gray colored glasses. You really can't even know. It's like it's hard to even see or grasp for in your experience something that's more positive because you're in that bad place. And it's like it almost doesn't occur to you.
Exactly.
It's like out of your reach is kind of what it feels like. So, you know, I mean, even though I do have one of those brains that never stops and it's a super active mind, and it's very hard for me to get to that place where I can really relax and be focused in meditation, I find that the more I practice it, the better I get at it. And it's not every day that it works for me, but, you know, even if I can get to that place, you know, Abraham always says, even out of this 15-minute meditation, if you have 1 or 2 minutes or even 30 seconds where you've truly reached that really relaxed place, that's when there's that opening. For us, it's like we've taken that filter of negative thoughts away and allowed the universe to connect with us, or our inner being to connect with us in a way where we might be able to feel it and hear it. So, you know, for me, you know, the more I practice, the better I get at it. And when I'm really in that relaxed place, when my mind's really quiet, that's when the vibrations coming to me are from source. And they're super powerful, but at the time when my mind is quiet, they feel really subtle.
Isn't that interesting? And it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about being in a happy place that doesn't always feel exhilarating. It's still happy. It still feels good. It's just kind of quiet. In fact, this past spring, Cindy Chavez was telling me about mirror exercises where you talk into the mirror every morning and you tell yourself you love yourself and here's all the things I love about me and so forth, in part to express love to myself and in part to use it as a way to clear the mind of all the negative chatter. The amazing thing was after, and that's really why I did it, because I wanted to get rid of the negative chatter. After about 20 days, it was kind of faded a little bit, but I hadn't really gotten rid of it entirely. But by day 30 or thereabout, it was gone entirely.
Wow.
And that was a really strange place to be in, because all of a sudden my mind was quiet. I wasn't used to it. It was like I was kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop, and there was no shoe dropping. And then then I realized I liked it. In fact, I liked it a lot. And I did not miss all that negative chatter going on in my head again.
So was that kind of permanent for you? Did it shut it off permanently, or was it just for a while? Or did it bring you to a new level?
It shut it off for a while. It did take me to a new level, a new level of awareness about my ability to take control of my own mind. And realizing that the ways that we take control of our minds using the processes that Abraham and others give us, those ways are actually much more powerful than they seem on the surface. Because that's what I always think. My very, very first thought in the back of my mind, whenever I hear about some new processes Oh yeah, right. Okay. Total dismissal and a lot of doubt and so forth. And then eventually maybe I'll try it. And in some cases I actually get some good results out of it. So when I get really good results like I got with the mirror exercises where I completely achieved the goal, with the goal being to get rid of the negative chatter, that was kind of astonishing. That was pretty surprising.
Is.
Yeah. And all of a sudden now I had more appreciation. I think that was the big step forward. I mean, you talked about, how I kind of taking the next step. The next step was realizing that the processes really work. They really do produce pretty good results. They can produce excellent results if you give them enough of a chance, which I did. I mean, my past history was not to do a 30-day thing for 30 days. My past history was to do a 30-day thing for 30 minutes and then quit.
Right.
And I actually did it for 30 days,
Good for you, because I think it's amazing how, even though, the goal is get happy and then you get what you want kind of thing, or get happy and then happy is the goal. I mean, that can also be a big manifestation, but those processes that you're talking about, using those little strategies and exercises like the ones that Ask and It Is Given in the back, can be so valuable, so valuable. You were asking last time in our discussion that was a non-podcast.
In the airy fairyland that disappeared into nothingness, but it was a great discussion anyway.
I know. You're asking what was my favorite process.
Right.
Asking It Is Given. And, I've used a number of them, and they're not all of them. I do love the fact that they have that list of the emotional scale from despair all the way up to elation. And, real easy one you're describing, that mirror one. I wonder, is that from Ask and It Is Given? I'm curious.
I don't know if it's from there. I know it might be in there. I know it from Jack Canfield. When Cindy pointed me to a blog post that he did on the topic. And I figured, well, I like Jack Canfield a lot. I liked him in The Secret. I like his chicken soup books. I have a lot of respect for the man. So if he thought it was worth doing, and he said that literally he used it to get rid of his negative chatter, okay, if it's good enough for Jack, it's good enough for me.
Absolutely.
And that's why I made the lead to stick with it. That's why I stuck with it, because Jack stuck with it. If it hadn't been Jack, I'm not sure I would have done it. But I figured, even if it's dumb, the first 20 days, no real progress, maybe a little bit of progress. Hey, Jack did it for 30. Okay, I'll do it for 30.
Interesting. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Because like the pivot one is one that I've used quite a bit, but that doesn't take a lot of, follow through or practicing. That's just I use it quite a bit, but it's kind of like, okay, this negative thing is happening over here.
Right.
Or it's in my thoughts and I don't want that. So I'm going to pivot away from that onto any other next better feeling thought that I can reach for.
Right.
But the one that I found that was so powerful for me, just really life-changing in a lot of ways, was many years ago when I first got divorced. I went through a summertime where I was super just negative and looked at everything. I was just depressed. I looked through everything through gray colored glasses and saw a lot of
that's a miserable thing to go through. I mean, you were married how long? 25 years?
25 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a long time to be married, and then all of a sudden it ends painfully. That's awful.
Well, yeah, and the thing is I knew that it needed to happen. It was actually a good thing, and I wanted it to happen. But going through it is a whole nother thing. Suddenly everything shifts, and you don't have that couple relationship, and many things in your life change. So it really was a big shift for me. But what I found was there was this one exercise in Ask and It Is Given. And I don't remember exactly what it was called, and I didn't really follow the instructions the way I was supposed to, because, as we were saying earlier, we're both kind of rebels when it comes to following.
Oh, absolutely. We do it our own way. To heck with them.
In fact, my daughter Jenny was just saying to me the other day that she's like, we're not really, in our family, we're not really that much of rule followers. It's kind of like, if the rule makes sense to us, we'll follow it, but otherwise we just kind of don't follow it. And I think that was kind of true of this. So what it involved, it was this exercise where you look at where you are on the emotional scale. And I was way down in despair. I was at the bottom of the barrel.
Right.
And there's only a few exercises in Ask and It Is Given that really address feeling that low.
Yeah, that's surprising. But I was checking that during the podcast. and you're right. There are very few that's number 22 on the scale. And there's very, very few that actually address number 22, which surprises me, actually.
And it's funny because you were even saying, that very few address are up in the positives, that there's so many of that emotional scale, so many of the emotions are negative or neutral.
Well, I have to mend that now because you're right. The scale itself only has like 6 positive items on it, but the processes, a lot of those processes are for people who are in steps 1 through 5.
Exactly.
Which is really interesting. Exactly. Well, you made the comment during the podcast about how, well, why would you go do a process if you're feeling good? But apparently Abraham wants you to because they got a lot of processes that are in there exactly for when you're feeling good.
Well, I guess to feel even happier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so with that one, the way that I did it was I was going on a car ride for about 2 hours and knew that I'd have complete privacy. Nobody was watching. Nobody was listening. I could, even feelings that I had that I was ashamed of or embarrassed by or didn't really express, I could just let all out.
Right.
And, so the process involved starting with that bottom emotion, which was despair or hopelessness. And basically, I didn't write it out. I just said it out, said it aloud. All the things that I could possibly think of that I felt hopeless about. Mm-hmm. And I had that little Ask and It Is Given book on the right seat while I'm driving. And I just said them aloud. I yelled them aloud. I cried. I just let it all out. Every single thing I thought with no filters. And after about a half hour, I was, completely exhausted, but I also realized there was nothing else I could think of that I was hopeless about.
Yeah.
And I went back and looked at the list, and I don't know, the next one might have been sadness or wherever I went to next, and then did the same thing, went through all the things I could think of that I was sad about, and literally did a whole brain dump, went through all the emotions again, and then kind of moved up and moved up and moved up. And the highest I was able to get to, in a really honest way, was overwhelm. And I really, at that point, even going from despair and hopelessness to overwhelm is like a huge leap.
Oh, yeah.
Huge. So after that 2 hours, I'd hit that point, and that was about as far as I could go. But I never, ever went fully back down to that hopelessness again. Mm-hmm. It was like it cleared out that bottom level.
Yeah.
Really amazing.
It's like you mucked out the stall, so to speak, and all the muck was gone. Yeah.
Right. And, that's something that I feel like when, there's with what Abraham always says is, if you can change your thoughts or think about something more positive or go in a more positive direction, that's the way to go. But if something keeps coming up again and again and again, some negative thought or negative emotion, that you got to deal with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, that's a lot of times when people do come to coaching or therapy or healing or something that is going to help them get out of that painful place.
I think the process you were doing was actually the 20-second process, the last one on the list, moving up the emotional scale.
Yes, that's it.
It's that one. And
I may have not followed the directions at all.
That's all right. No, that's fine. I'm curious because they talk about it. Well, actually, in here they don't even talk about how to use it in terms of a repetitive thing where you climb a little bit up the scale, sit there for a little bit, then climb up the scale a little bit more and sit there for a little bit, get used to your feeling there and move your way up. It sounds like from what you described, you just let it all out. And when you were all done, you checked and you were halfway up the scale.
Yeah, that's really true.
Yeah.
That's really true.
So you didn't even have to go up. That was the thing that always got me about how they talked about, well, if you're at despair and depression and powerlessness, go for insecurity, guilt, and unworthiness because it's one step up.
Right.
If I'm at 22 and I know that the first positive is at 6, 21 isn't good enough for me. I want to move a little bit higher than that,
Well, when you're feeling that bad, you're just in so much pain, you want it to go away.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't care what it takes or what you have to pay you don't care at that point. Something that's been keeping you up at night and has been, dragging you down as repeated. That's when people that's really when people are super motivated for coaching.
I mean, Louis this morning during the morning podcast said, well, that's when you want to go for revenge. And we both laughed at that, because when you're in depression, going for revenge, you could just almost see the hatchet murder coming out of that one. But
it does feel better though.
Well, it does. It's just we don't recommend that you actually carry it out. That's all.
No. That's true.
But
So, one of the things we were also talking about that I found so interesting is we were talking about, you had said that Wendy had brought up the idea of, do you do Abraham or do you do therapy or
yeah, that was
what?
my question. Wendy actually does sort of a hybrid between therapy and Abraham, and it's a really cool hybrid, I think, because she doesn't do the therapeutic route where you explore everything in your childhood necessarily, although sometimes she'll do that. But more, she'll take whatever this resistance is that she's detected that's in her way, so to speak, and asks it questions and kind of probes it and, plays with it a little bit and just keeps going after it and asking more questions and more questions, ask her intervening questions about it. And she just keeps going and going and going at it until it disappears, which is kind of similar to what you did when you were, letting it all out, so to speak. You were just letting it all out. Get it out of here. I'm done.
Exactly. Yeah. And I agree. I mean, I think that's a lot of what I do in my own coaching is help, if there's something that needs to be to go back and really address it, that it is important to. I mean, I find, one of the clients I was working with recently had some relationship issues, and, it just kept being there and being there and being there. And it was kind of stubbornly stuck there. She felt stubbornly stuck there. And in order to get past that, we did what Abraham said and kind of went back and looked at it and said, okay, so if this is happening in your relationship now, and these are the kind of guys, these wrong guys that you keep attracting, what does that feeling remind you of from your upbringing? Why is that comfortable and familiar for you?
Yeah.
Something that you keep repeating and attracting over and over again. And, I mean, I had mentioned also, I come from a family of family therapists. My dad was one of the pioneers in family therapy, James Framo. So it's kind of in my blood.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's just my brain, and it's how I think and approach things initially. So we went back and looked at what are the dynamics that were between her parents. And it did have a lot of those same feelings and dynamics, even if it wasn't the specifics that she kept attracting over and over again, because, that's what we know when we're kids, and that's what feels comfortable and familiar. And that might be our first step. But, I think dwelling there too much can sometimes be not always the best thing, is to stay there. And taking that next step and going up into, okay, so you don't want that. So what do you want? And getting more into the coaching and the Abraham processes, I think, is really helpful to use a combination of all of those.
And I get the impression from what you're saying, you vary it with the situation. I mean, like with yourself, when you were going through the terrors and frustrations and anger and so forth of the divorce, and you went off and took the drive, what you were doing was very therapeutic in a sense. Because you were just identifying all the negative crap and just getting angry about it.
Exactly. Or sad or whatever. It was just all flowing up.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It was an emotion dump, really.
Yeah. And, I really do see the benefit of therapy too. When I was saying that when I got my master's in social work back in the dark ages, way back when in the big hair days, and the horrible fashion days. That was just a decade. I'm just saying. So,
nobody would have known if you hadn't said that. You realize that, right?
I'm real. No, I didn't mean that. I meant every time. That's what I meant.
Okay.
So, they recommended that you go to therapy and get some experience, not just so that you know what it's like and how it feels, but also to kind of clear out some of your own stuff. So you're not bringing that into, the therapeutic relationship with your clients, or at least you're aware of it. And going through that therapy was super helpful. Very, it was kind of like we were talking about. It's like that layer. It was that bottom layer. Or the top layer is really what it was. It was kind of that top layer of the stuff that I was experiencing at the time. But it's back to the ready to be ready to be ready. I was only ready to be ready to be ready. I wasn't really ready yet to get past all that stuff. So years later, I went back for a touch up, and then maybe I was ready to be ready. And it's not till it got to be more recent that I was really ready. So there's I think the different phases we go through in our lives and stuff, and the different levels really shows up in that therapy.
Yeah, that ready to be ready to be ready, it's a funny concept. I mean, it has a little bit of a joke built into it anyway. But it also is very evocative. It evokes the idea that because we do have tendencies to, start from a place where we're really not in alignment, but we're trying to talk ourselves into it. At that point, we're really not in good receptive mode. We're trying desperately to be in receptive mode. We're doing all the processes and modalities and, practices that we can think of, affirmations and vision boards and you name it, repeating to ourselves and talking to our friends in positive ways and blah, 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 blah. And yet we're still not there. We're still not ready.
Exactly. And I think that not, being aware of what it's like when you're ready to be ready, meaning that you're not really ready yet. You're kind of in that beginning phase where you're in step one and you've kind of put that out there. Really at that point, what's holding us back is that we're like, for example, with the money or whatever that issue might be, or with a relationship, is we're worrying about it. We're doubting it. We don't feel like we deserve it. We come up with all the reasons why it won't work, or I can't have it, or we don't believe it. Or feeling a shortage, like I don't have enough time, I'm not smart enough, I don't have enough energy.
Yep.
Or having that split energy.
Yep.
Which way do I go? Kind of thing.
Exactly.
And you were describing a little bit of how that's what it was like with you and relationships earlier on.
Well, yeah. I mean, actually, it was much more severe than that. During the non-podcast podcast, I was quite eloquent about the fact that I was shooting down my relationships left and right without realizing it.
Absolutely.
I had spent from my early 20s till I met Louise at age 41, that entire time period, I spent sabotaging every single potential relationship that came my way and didn't realize I was doing it. But I was doing it quite deliberately. Just not deliberately in that sense. My approach was very deliberate. What I didn't realize is that the deliberateness of my approach was actually preventing me from having successful relationships.
Right.
Because I was concerned with the fact that when I was growing up, I mean, I kept hearing all the time about divorce statistics and broken homes. I mean, TV was full of broken home stories. It was like, the 70s and the 80s were just full of that kind of thing. And I didn't come from a broken home. But I knew enough people who had been through stuff like that, and you kept seeing it on TV, and it's like everything else. You get inundated with it over and over again. You start to believe that all marriages lead to broken homes.
Absolutely.
Yep. And so I was really very, very concerned that I was going to make absolutely certain I would never get myself into a relationship with someone that was going to end up in a broken home, which meant every single time I kept slicing and dicing the potential for somebody right after I had met her. We barely said hello and gone out for drinks or something, and already I was finding all the reasons why it wasn't going to work. And I was right.
Louise.
Well, no, this was before Louise. This is long before
Louise. Okay.
Oh, this is long before
earlier
Louise.
dates.
Yeah, and I did that for 20 years, and didn't have a single successful relationship. My longest relationship during that time was 1 month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You really were resisting it.
I was very good at it. I was very good at not having a relationship.
And then, so what shifted for you?
I gave up. I mean, the longer story is the last non-relationship, carrying the same theme along. The last non-relationship I was in, which was extremely painful, had left me so wrung out. I mean, talk about therapy. I'd actually gone to a therapist during that relationship because I was just at my wit's end trying to understand women, trying to understand relationships because nothing made sense, nothing worked. And interestingly enough, my therapist came to the conclusion that in that particular case, the problem wasn't me, the problem was the other person, which was really wild.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it was true, by the way. The other person was in a really messy place. She's just my therapist kind of overlooked the fact that I'd been shooting my own relationships in the foot. But, but so nevertheless.
Part of it was you were picking the wrong person or allowing the wrong person in.
Oh, I was very good at producing bad chances at relationships. Like the worst possible choice. I was really, really good at that. Yeah. I mean, I would say.
Of course, validated your thoughts and feelings.
Of course, because now, of course, there was no way I was going to get married. But after I went through that last one, I was so wrung out that I just quit. I said, I'm done with relationships. I just can't do this anymore. It's too painful. It's too crazy of a roller coaster. It never works out. It never turns into anything good. Listen to the law of attraction there, right? It's always bad. I quit. I just quit. And a month later, a friend introduced me to Louise. Yeah.
It was the letting go.
It was the letting go. Very much so.
You stopped that resistance. You stopped that momentum.
I stopped the pattern. Yeah.
And you made it where it was kind of not really actively negative in your vibration because it was just not there.
It was still there to a little extent, but the major momentum was long gone. Yeah. I mean, because I still felt it. I mean, I felt the remnants of it. I remember when Deborah, who introduced Louise and I together, Louise had been reaching out to all kinds of people that she knew, anybody that she knew, asking, did you know of any healthy single guys who might be available? Mm-hmm. which, considering my history, is an interesting question. But but nevertheless, mutual friend Deborah, who I knew from the swing dance community and who Louise knew as a fellow therapist, Deborah was also a therapist and is a therapist, knew me along with 200 other guys. For some reason, she thought of me, and we ended up hooking together. Well, that process was kind of a drawn out process in that we spent about 3 weeks talking on the phone once a week, long conversations.
Wow.
And we were getting along really, really well. And there's a little piece of me that was like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, okay, well, this is going well, but something's going to go wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And
well, you had that history.
Well, we did, and we did have it. We did have one thing that go wrong because we met. I said, okay, well, we've had 3 good conversations. Why don't we try to meet? So we met at this restaurant we only lived about 3 miles apart, which was pretty wild.
Wow.
And we met at a restaurant about halfway between us, and it was a really bad restaurant. I don't know why I picked it, but we met there, and it was a disastrous meeting. It was a disaster.
What went so wrong?
Everything. She came in, and well, first of all, she had her own stuff too, her own past relationship stuff that she was still dealing with and letting go of, and so forth. So, like for the entire time that we sat across the table from each other, she wouldn't look at me. She was looking down at the table the whole time.
Is she real shy?
Not really, no.
Interesting.
But, because of ex-relationship stuff, for whatever reason, she just couldn't look me in the eye. She just couldn't bring herself to do that. And meanwhile,
we all got our stuff, right?
We do, yeah. And meanwhile, I was finding all the reasons not to, to believe that it was going to fall apart, but I wasn't doing it, with effort. It was just kind of like, I was used to it. It was an old pattern, so I could just do it. So she walked in, she was wearing this straw hat, which she thought of as being cute and playful, and I thought it made her look like a hick.
Poor Louise.
Oh, I mean, it was terrible.
You were judging her from the moment.
It was terrible. Oh, yeah. But I wasn't doing it my usual way. It was like, oh yeah, I always do that, so no big deal. I wasn't giving any thought. It's just, oh yeah, okay. And then later that day, that same day, that was 2 days before my birthday, actually. 2 days before the birthday, Deborah, who had introduced us, was having a party for herself, myself, and another person, all of whom have birthdays within a few days of each other. So it was like a joint birthday party. Mm-hmm. And I was already committed to go to that. So after Louise and I said our goodbyes, and interestingly enough, we were both pretty honest. Neither one of us said we'd call the other.
Oh, wow. Well, I guess better be honest, right?
Yeah. And we both walked away from it thinking, well, that's not going to work. And I went to the party, and Deborah said, so how did it go? And I said, well, not really that good, actually. And I explained to her what happened. And she said, well, you're going to give it the 3-date rule, right? And I said, the what? The 3-date rule. The 3-date rule. What's that? Oh, well, that's where you give it 3 dates before you make a decision. I said, really?
That makes a lot of sense.
It does. Well, yeah, especially in retrospect, it makes a whole lot of sense. At the time, my reaction was, really? I have to do that? No, and meanwhile, Louise, now, I think I've told you, I'm really, really tall. I'm 6'8" tall. Louise, of course, was blown away by the height. Now, she wanted somebody who was tall, but I was really tall. Really tall.
She's like, maybe not that tall.
So she gets on the phone with her friend Leona, and she's all emotionally distraught because Leona is saying, well, what's wrong with him? She says, well, he's 6'8". He's so tall. And she says, well, what else is wrong with him? Well, that's it. Isn't that enough?
So her, it was the straw hat, and you, it was being too tall.
Yeah.
So that exactly. Was like the one thing.
And Leona's advice to her was similar, in a sense, to Deborah's advice to me, which was, if it's only the height, don't let that stop you.
Right.
And so I reluctantly followed Deborah's advice, and I don't know how reluctant Louise was in following Leona's advice, But we ended up hooking up on another date a couple weeks later, and then another one a couple of weeks after that. And within a couple weeks after that, we were together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you said that I was sort of asking you about how you felt when you were ready, what that feeling was, how that was different for you.
Yeah, and it took a while to get to that point because of all that history I had. I wasn't ready to just get married. I had too many things in my background to say, no, don't just jump right into it. Louise was pretty sure within a couple of months after that point that yes, she wanted to get married. I wasn't ready there. And I told her I needed a year. I needed time to just, sort through all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And as it turned out, we only had about 8 or 10 months because her father's health wasn't good. And we needed to, if we were going to do it, we needed to get married while he was still around, which we did. And he passed about 3 months after our wedding. But, so it was worth pushing it, so to speak. But, getting back to how I was feeling early on, I was feeling confused. I was liking it. I was enjoying the relationship. It was really, really good. I'd never had that before. But on the other hand, I mean, I was so used to all the failures, and it was the other shoe syndrome. I was just waiting for that other shoe to drop, and it never dropped. Mm-hmm. So I was going through a process. You
were ready to be ready.
I was ready to be ready. Yes, exactly. I wasn't ready yet, but I was ready to be ready. And then by that December, around Christmas or so, I was pretty sure I was going to ask her. And in fact, actually by Christmas, my mom was asking me, "Are you going to ask her?" And I said, "Yeah, probably on Valentine's Day," which is what I ended up doing. Yeah.
So it's funny because, when you first put out that wish, or at some point you put a desire out for that relationship, whether you did it consciously or not.
Oh yeah.
It had already happened in your vortex. It was waiting your vibrational escrow.
It was waiting for over 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And all that time when you were still having, bad feelings about it or doubting it or not having it work or whatever, all of that really was just not agreeing with your inner being.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was very good at it, by the way. I regularly disagreed with my inner being, and I felt it every single time. But you asked me how I felt, toward the end there when I was getting ready to ask her to marry me.
When you were really ready. Yeah,
when I was really ready, that was an almost indescribable feeling because I felt the full range of emotions all at once. And I don't think I've ever felt that before or since. It was delightful, it was confusing, and it was powerful. It was an amazingly powerful place to be in. I mean, literally, I could feel the entire range, and I could go to any part of that range instantly, anytime I wanted to, just depending on, which part I was thinking about.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was it leaning obviously then more towards the positive?
Oh, it felt very good. It felt very good. Even though I knew I had direct access to the negative feelings, I still felt good anyway. Mm-hmm. I think there's a certain empowerment in that because I was one of the many males who had learned early on to shut down feelings. And so here I was now to a point where everything was open again.
Wow.
That's a big shift. That's a very big shift to be in. So on the one hand, you are in a space that you're not used to being in. And on the other hand, it feels great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's perfect because when you're supposed to take action is when you're feeling good and it's an inspired action.
It was inspired.
So you're in a positive place, which leads to really a long-term happy marriage.
Interesting thing about that inspired place too, because if you had asked me at the time whether it felt inspired, I would have said no. Mm-hmm. And the reason I would have said no is, to me, inspired should feel like something, like fireworks, amazing. Oh my God, it's a gigantic light bulb that just went on.
Uh-huh.
But that's not the way the inspired felt. The inspired felt like, this is the next logical step to take. That's what inspired felt like.
Yes. And it's a lot more I've noticed Abraham more recently, rather than bliss and joy and happy, is talking a lot more about satisfaction and the next logical step.
And it was all of that, actually. I mean, I felt that whole range that you just described there, everything from satisfaction up to utter blissful joy. I was feeling the whole range of it.
All of it, yep. So
but the inspirational part was just calm.
Right. And it's kind of like after meditation, when things are calm, when we're really just comfortable and satisfied and quieted in our mind, that's when inner being talks to us. And that's when we know that the messages and the impulses that we're getting are coming from our inner being because we're connected.
It's
And
funny.
it doesn't feel like this big, huge.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it's true. And it's funny, I was asking Wendy Dillard about this because she's been doing what she calls her Project X. She recently made the jump from W-2, I have a job world, to being self-employed entrepreneur, full-time coach world. And she's been telling that whole story on the podcast. So anyone who wants to hear the whole story, go back to February and listen to all the Wendy Dillard podcasts, and you'll hear it one after another, all the little steps along the way. But I asked her what it felt like to have gotten there. And I've asked her that on a number of occasions about, she's had some major breakthroughs, some quantum leap or whatever. And what does it feel like? And her answer is always the same. It feels normal.
Yeah. It's true. It's like the next logical step.
Yes.
It just feels natural and like this is just what's coming next.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
We kind of expect the fireworks to be there, but it doesn't have to be fireworks. It can feel normal and it still feels good.
Well, and that's the thing too, is I think that when we're getting messages from our inner being or impulses, it's very quiet and subtle.
Yes.
It's not going to be hit you over the head with a 2x4.
Actually, you don't want to be hit over the head.
It can be every now and then.
You really don't want the 2x4 if you can avoid it because they do hurt.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's when I think, a lot of times I'll be like wanting to get into action mode right away. I want to do something. I want to make this happen. There's something I want. I get really motivated. I get really excited about it. And I just want it to happen. But really what I'm just doing is getting ready to be ready, because I might be ready for that piece of it. I might be ready for the dream part of it or the excitement part of it about fantasizing and visualizing what something could be like. But I'm not, if I'm still in that place where I'm feeling like I have to push myself or where there's any doubt or where I'm sort of wobbling, where there's a little wobble in it.
Oh, yeah.
That's when I know that it's really not the time to take the action.
Well, most of the time I think that's true. I have to say, in this particular case where I had made the decision, yes, I wanted to ask Louise to marry me, that was actually a good thing to not be all worked up about, to not even be paying attention to the fact that there was a wobble. Because I had so much history in my own life that was anti-marriage, that now that I was on the brink of it, if I had spent any time focusing on that, I probably would have shied away. Right. So
you really pivoted away from those thoughts.
I wouldn't even allow myself to go there. In fact, when it came time on Valentine's Day of 1999, when I asked her, I was in a space that I knew if I spent any time at all thinking about what I was going to do, I would probably have a nervous breakdown. I'm serious. I was really, I knew that I would get all worked up about it if I did that. It was my only way to stay calm was just keep my mind off it, keep my mind off it, keep my mind off it. And I had it planned, and I went to, believe it or not, our local supermarket is the best place to buy flowers. I know it sounds strange, but our supermarket does wonderful flowers. They last for weeks. I mean, they're just the best flowers in the world. Yeah, really, really good flowers. So I told her I needed to go out for something, went out to get the flowers. I had hidden the ring in the glove compartment of the car. I figured that was a good place that she would never look for it. Grabbed the ring, brought the flowers in, and I knew how I was going to broach it, because I knew even saying the words were going to be tough. Because that would bring up all the old stuff, and I had to find some way to get the words out. So what I did was, do you know the old movie Breakfast at Tiffany's, Audrey Hepburn? Yeah. Yep. And in that movie, I can't remember what the actor's name is, but he is trying to introduce the concept of marriage to her. And he's asking her about, she's trying to marry a millionaire. She's like after one millionaire after another, right? And apparently there's this one millionaire, multimillionaire that she's going to marry, and she's absolutely nuts about him, and he's absolutely nuts about her, and so forth. And her future paramour says, "So has he actually asked you to marry him?" And she says, "Well, not in so many words." And his response is, "Well, it takes 4."
Right, exactly.
and she goes on and on. He says, "Will you marry me?" And you realize he just asked her to marry him. But he did it conversationally so that, and sure enough, she misses it. She completely misses the boat entirely. No idea that she's just been asked to marry him, right? And it occurred to me, oh, I could do that.
You could.
So that's what I did. I got back to the apartment where we were living, and gave her the flowers, and she was sitting down in an easy chair, and she was loving the flowers and so forth. I had the ring in my pocket, and I knelt down next to the chair where she was. Not in front of her, because that would look too obvious, like, okay, I'm about to ask her to marry me, but to the side.
Sneaking it in there,
and I had given her the flowers, and there was a card with it. And the card said 4 little words. That's all the card said. And she says,
oh.
4 little words? And she looks at me. I said, yes. Will you marry me?
Oh.
And she looked at me, and she looked at the card, and she looked at me, and she said, for real?
She's thinking, this guy's never going to marry me.
And I said, yes. And then she just lost it.
Oh.
And I lost it, too, because, I was shaking like a leaf.
Oh.
Really, Patty, it's a good thing I did it the way I did. I don't think I could have done it any other way. Because I was just too worked up emotionally.
I bet. Well, and obviously, even though you were having all those fears that you were pivoting away from, the positive way outweighed any of those, because you were able to move forward and do it.
And that's why I was thinking about what you said earlier, inspired action. It was inspired action because I was inspired by the fact that I felt I was in a relatively relaxed place. It was a normal place. It's like you said, it was the place for the next step. It felt like the normal thing to do. So even though I knew there was going to be a piece of me that was going to practically fall apart, all I had to do was just treat it like a next normal step, and everything would be okay.
Yeah, interesting. And it's funny because I think a lot of times when I'm in that place where I've meditated or whatever, and I'm in that open place and I feel really good, I feel connected to my inner being, and I do get inspired action, it can be sort of surprising what that inspired action is or that impulse is. It can be something really silly or seemingly insignificant. Like, it's the time that, I don't know if you've heard the Abraham where they talk about when Esther was in a good place, did her meditation, and woke up or came out of that, and the first thought that she had was to play with her audio system in her house. And so she played with the audio system, and she started playing rap music, and it led to her having this guy come out to help her move furniture around. That was another impulse she had, was to move furniture around in her house. Okay. So these guys came out, and it turns out they were rap artists. And she was like, oh my gosh, I knew. So she turns on the rap music, and they connected over that. And she ended up introducing law of attraction to him and all that kind of stuff. But, I don't know if that's necessarily what her wish was, but it was the idea that you can have inspired action from your inner being that almost doesn't seem to make sense at the time.
Oh boy, is that the truth?
Some silly step.
Yes. Yeah,
and it's because the universe has figured out the way. You don't need to figure out the how. And this is just, they're like, here you go. Here's the first step. That's all you got to take.
So that's when I have to remind myself how bad my track record is at predicting how it's going to play out so that I can get out of my own way. And if I can get out of my own way, that's when the crazy stuff happens. That's what I describe it as. You described it much more nicely and elegantly, but I describe that as the crazy stuff happening. Because I have no idea how it's going to play out. And then it plays out, and I say, what the hell was that?
Like I had a, sometimes you just kind of put a thought out there. You really don't know how it's going to happen. And the universe just kind of figures it out for you.
Yeah.
That was when, I was living alone in my condo and wanted to try out having a roommate. I don't know if I've told you the story before. And just kind of put that thought out there that, gosh, I didn't even tell anybody. I just said, gosh, it would be really fun to sort of try a roommate out and see how that works. And the next week, I didn't even tell anybody. And I didn't want to do an ad. I didn't want to go through all that. I wanted this roommate to just fall into my lap and be the right and perfect roommate. And the next week, but I wasn't anxious about it. It wasn't like a huge deal to me. I didn't feel doubtful. I just kind of thought, yeah. It was sort of like this light thought. It
was kind of like the ultimate kind because there was no resistance.
Right. Exactly. And the next week I got an email from a friend of mine saying that they had a friend who was looking for a place in North Coastal San Diego County, who wanted to go to the Gemological Institute right near here for 6 months and have a roommate and be a room in someone's house. And she came out to visit. and we got along instantly. And her top price was my bottom price, so we met there. And honest to God, she ended up living with me 2.5 years, and we never had a disagreement.
Nice. Wow.
It was just the perfect setup. It just worked out that way.
It shows what happens when you just let it go. Boy, because that played out beautifully.
It really did.
Yeah.
So I'm actually at that place again.
Oh.
I'm like, I'd like the right and perfect roommate to just drop into my lap.
Well, there you go. Well, that's going to happen then.
So
you know that from experience. That's the nice thing. When you've done it before, you have more confidence about it the second time.
Yeah, yeah. And it is funny, though, how it doesn't really take action.
Isn't that strange?
Figuring it out.
Which is the one thing we think we most have to do, particularly if it's something that we do have attachment to, particularly if it's something that we really desperately want to have happen, not something I have no real attachment to, but something we do have attachment to. That's when we feel like we have to take action.
We already have all that negative and those fears and that momentum built up.
Yes.
Doubting it, or otherwise it wouldn't have been a long-term want. It would have already happened.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So those are the ones I think that are a little more challenging to shift.
It's where I know when I'm in that space, I know that I have to do what Abraham talks about in a lot of places, but they particularly talk about it in their book, The Astonishing Power of Emotions. That's where they spend a lot of time on the rowboat on the stream metaphor. And that's where the goal is to let go of the oars, because the tendency is to just keep rowing, and we end up rowing upstream, which is the opposite direction from where what we want actually resides. And it isn't until we let go of the oars and the boat just kind of gets taken by the stream, turned around, and headed back downstream to where everything is. That's a hard thing to do when it's something that is really important to you, when it's something you got some energy built up about and some angst built up about. Letting go of the oars at that point is tough.
And I think also our society teaches us work hard, work harder, keep working harder, and if you don't get it, then work even harder.
Right.
And push it and make it happen. And that's actually the opposite. I mean, you can make something happen, by doing that.
Yeah,
however, it's like you're vacuuming without having the vacuum cleaner plugged in.
And I often wondered why it was some people could make things happen. I finally realized what it was. Because Abraham once said that passion trumps all the rest of the stuff. Well, they've got this tremendous passion to make the thing happen. And so their passion wins out. Doesn't matter how much resistance they put up. The passion overwhelms it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now I understand why they get there. Now I understand also why I don't want to follow their route.
Right. Well, and because we can make it happen that way by doing lots and lots of hard work and pushing really hard. And ultimately you can get that. But why, first of all, when we make something happen in that way, we might get it, but that starts us off the beginning of that experience already having a struggle, which I really do believe brings that energy into the whole experience.
The struggle is an interesting thing. Joel and I have talked a lot about struggle versus suffering because it seemed like they're similar things, but obviously they're not, of course, because the difference is suffering is where you decide you're going to feel negatively about it. Struggle is where you're just trying to find your feet. You're trying to you're trying to work your way out or play your way out or think your way out, or you're trying to do stuff like that. Suffering is where you're just in pain.
Yeah. I think struggle or suffering is where you're sort of hopeless.
Yes.
And suffering is where you're still hopeful. You maybe aren't believing yet, but you're still hopeful. And you think if I just struggle enough, I'll get this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's like an ongoing struggle. Yeah.
And struggle is where we do our biggest growing. I mean, when we're in that place of struggle.
But do we really need to? Do we really need to do that struggle?
Well, I guess ultimately we don't, but so many times we do.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of Joel, speaking of Joel, so much of his history was struggling with some really bad places he put himself into. But he considers, this is really wild, he considers those worst places that he was in to be the best things that ever happened to him. Mm-hmm. Because the way he looks at it is, from there on, it was always right back up. There was no place to fall over at that point.
Yeah, you've already hit your bottom. You can't get any lower than that.
And the spring, it turns into a springboard if you get low enough like that, because he had some pretty low places. prison and homelessness and starving hunger and so forth. And each one of those times, it just springboarded him into something amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he was down there at shelter and food.
Yes.
And safety.
Yeah. And he didn't even have that.
But I got to say, it's all relative. That is a really, really difficult place to be.
Oh, God, yes.
In everybody's life, we reach points that feel really low. And they might not be at that level, but it's kind of all relative.
It is.
Pain is pain.
Yeah, it's not like it's a competition to see, okay, who can go lower? How low can you go?
Exactly.
No, this is not limbo.
And the thing is if it's possible, one of the things that the reason why I continually practice this meditation piece is so that I can reach that calm, sort of, what was the words that we were using before, that place where we're just satisfied and quiet and our minds kind of clear,
right? Is
not only because of that way that it feels, but of course I have my secondary gain in mind,
right? Which
is that I hope to get the things that I want. And in order to do that, when I do get into that place where I'm connected to my inner being, I've got all that power of that universe. Mm-hmm. So things almost feel effortless.
Yeah.
When I'm really connected.
That's true.
But I know that according to Abraham, what we're really supposed to do is just be happy to have that feeling and not the manifestation.
That's a challenge because for something that we really, really want, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to get to. I understand what they mean. Certainly, that's in a kind of a backward way, that's where I got to when I met Louise. But I don't really want to have to go through that to get there, know?
Right. And it just is interesting to me, too, how subtle it can feel. And I think sometimes it can be difficult to even recognize those subtleties.
Yep.
When there's that, so especially nowadays, the way that our society is with everything being marketing and splashiness and excitement and instant gratification and all those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. I feel like sometimes that almost makes it more challenging to be able to go back into that place where we recognize that quiet inner being place where we listen to those subtle messages is really a skill that needs to be practiced.
It's true. It's a skill we all need to develop. And as I'm looking at the clock, I realize I have another skill I have to develop because I have to make it a point every time to talk about our promo messages. So give me a moment to do that, okay?
Go for it.
First promo message, if you are not yet a subscriber, please take a moment to become a subscriber. We just recently updated the homepage of the website at loatoday.net with revised settings. We revised the description about what to do. So everything's right there. In a nutshell, the change right now that we just made is for Android users. If you're an Android phone user, you don't necessarily want to download any podcast app in the Play Store. It turns out some of them don't do a really good job of hooking into some podcasts, including ours. So the one we're recommending to everybody is use Google Podcasts. Use their particular app because that one works with anything, and it works with ours great. So download that and then look for us from within the Google Podcasts app. Do a little search for LOA Today. Will pop up, and you can subscribe. iPhones is really easy. Open the podcast software, do the search on LOA Today, and we're right there. So become a subscriber. And second, if you are an existing subscriber, please help us continue to do the outreach because all the little posts that people are putting on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn and all the different social media places are helping in a big way. Patty, we have literally doubled listenership for each individual episode in the last 2.5, 3 months. And it's all because people are doing that. So we ask people to keep right on doing that. It is making a huge difference. And our goal is to get this into the hands of the millions. In order for that to happen, we need you to just keep posting that you're listening to loatoday.net and keep passing it along. And Patty, because you are a terrific life coach who also has therapeutic background, you're a good person to talk to, especially for somebody who's kind of stuck in that loop where they're in the, they're ready to be ready. You got enough ready, so you got to get out of that loop, right? So how do they reach you to get out of the loop?
The best way is to email me, patty@pattyframocoaching.com.
All right. Very good. Well, we got this one done. Thank goodness.
Yay!
This one worked. Even though the last one didn't work, this one worked. So that was good.
Excellent.
And I can't wait to do it again next week. So I'll talk to you then. You're going to be up for that, right?
I'll be up for it. Sounds
okay, good. And we hope that you're up for it next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.